Welcome to episode 367 of We Don't Die Radio. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And this is a special video episode. If you are listening and you'd rather be watching, you can go to YouTube and just type in We Don't Die Radio 367. As a reminder, our home base is wedon'tdie.com, where you can now find, between this show and my other show, which is called Shades of the Afterlife, well over 400 episodes all about the afterlife. Pretty crazy, but I'm very excited to be the host for both of them. The thing that makes the shows different is that show, Shades of the Afterlife, does have commercial breaks, but it is talking about different topics all within one episode, whereas this one, we get the privilege of just talking to one special person with no commercial breaks and just finding out about their history. Also about We Don't Die at wedon'tdie.com. You can find out all about our upcoming classes, our workshops, our Facebook group, support through grief, medium demonstrations, all kinds of things are there for you. So today we are talking to a wonderful medium and a wonderful person. Her name is Dorry Rice. I first met Dorry back in 2020 after COVID hit the world, and we started doing online psychic medium workshops with our friends Phil and Carrie. And I do believe she's attended things with us since April or May. She's demonstrated her mediumship on our world famous Sunday gathering and has also given a warm and wonderful address to our global community. And I'm sure there will be more. Dorry is kind, she's wise, she's pleasant, and I've always thought very highly of her. So I'm so grateful today to have her with us. And I wanted to know her better. So I think it's perfect that we both get to find out more about Dorry and what brought her into this world of discovering the afterlife. And then as a medium, sharing the reality of the afterlife, because she is a woman who really lives for being of service to others. You can find out more about her at her website, DorryRice.com. So Dorry, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandra. I'm just so delighted to be here. I don't think we've ever had a long conversation, so this is going to be a delight.
We never have. It's just saying hello in one of the classes.
That's right.
Maybe in a breakout room or quickly on the Sunday gathering, but I really mean what I say. I've always thought very highly of you. You're always somebody who seems to me pretty even-keeled, knowledgeable, wise, but really caring. Plus, I know your commitment to the spirit world and good education and good mediumship. So for all that stuff and whatever has brought you there, here, now, today, just thank you for being who you are.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I know that I am committed.
Yes,
I'm
you are.
definitely committed to the spirit world.
You are. Well, let's go back and tell us your story, because we haven't had this conversation. How in the world did a nice girl like you get involved with the afterlife?
Well, it started pretty young with me. I was 2.5. The first and only time I saw spirit objectively, it was 2 days after my 17-month-old sister passed to the spirit world. And I had been present with her when she passed. We were playing together. We were only 14 months apart in age. My grandparents were looking after me because my mom was very distraught after my sister's passing. And I woke suddenly, and I was in the bed sleeping with them. And I woke very suddenly, and I saw a spirit form standing at the end of the bed, or I say standing, but it doesn't feel as though it was standing. And I started to scream. I was frightened, and I woke my grandparents, and they told me that I'd had a nightmare. And I kept on denying it was a nightmare, that there had been somebody standing there. Anyway, they calmed me down. They went back to sleep, but I did not. And I crept out of the room, and I went into the front bedroom where my little sister's coffin was. This was in Aberdeen, Scotland. So at the time, that was the custom, that the coffin was carried from home to the church and then to the graveyard. So I wanted to make sure she was still where she was supposed to be. And so I looked in and she was lying quietly in her coffin. So I felt much more at ease and I went back to bed. But as much as everybody tried to tell me that that was only a nightmare, I had been dreaming, I can still to this day picture this in my mind. And it's just like when we have a visitation in the night that's not a dream. It's vivid, it lasts, and it doesn't fade. So, and then I've always had what I call it a God urge. Although the word God is sometimes it has a feeling that isn't what I want to express. It's more like I want to know something that is always out of my reach. And I'd had that ever since I was a child. And I remember telling my mother that it was impossible for me to die. And she wanted to know, why was that? And I said, because the world would disappear if I died. My mother said, that's nonsense. We'd still be here. And I said, well, to me, you'd be gone. I might never see you again that way. And I said, I know that's not going to happen. So I never did lose that God urge, even though I cycled through a lot of different churches looking to find whatever it was I was looking for.
Wow. What a mighty little kid you were with all those questions and those thoughts. And
At 11, I was fortunate too that I was a little bit of I was a child that lived inside her head a lot and inside her soul, I think. And I remember going home from school one day when I was 11, and I used to always in the springtime look at the buds on the trees, and I always wanted to catch just that instant when they broke out. And I always missed it. And I kept on looking every springtime. And this one day, I'm 11, I'm walking home. I look up at the trees. I missed it again. And oh, I was so angry with myself. I said, you said you were going to watch. You said you were going to watch every day. Why didn't you look? And then all of a sudden, it felt like I was inside the world, as if the world was an egg. And I was inside this egg, and the shell was cracking open. And all I could see was this beautiful, beautiful navy blue sky filled with stars. And it must have been like the Milky Way or something. But in that instance, I knew there were worlds inside worlds inside worlds. And then I could only describe it as bliss. As an 11-year-old, I wouldn't have known what word to use, but it was like a bliss because the shivers just ran down me, and it only lasted seconds. But again, it's something that stays with you. And I never told anyone about it. It felt too special. It was a miracle. I call that my first epiphany, my first total comprehension that there was something beyond, and I'd had a taste of it.
And it left you wanting more tastes, can I assume?
Always. It never went away until it did go away once I came face to face with the divine. And when I was spiritualism was something that was common in our household, because in Scotland, it's much more common than it is in North America. And my mother had gone to a spiritualist church when she was 9 years old. And I know that when my dad came back from the war, he went to a spiritualist demonstration with my mom and friends of theirs. So it was nothing that was strange in our household or in our community. And I always had an interest in it. And then when I was in Montreal and I was a young mother, I went to the First Spiritualist Church of Montreal and became acquainted with several of the mediums there, one of which, Peggy Eaton, got to be quite a friend. And then time passed and I moved. And then out of the blue, Peggy called me. And she and I had both moved. I have no idea how she found me because I haven't seen her in about 2 or 3 years. And she insisted she was coming to my house the next day because I needed healing, which I did. And so Peggy arrived. Luckily, I had a spare bed that I could put her up in. But she just walked in, dropped her suitcase and said, go sit in a chair and I'm going to do an energy healing for you. And she did that. And then she kept her hands on my shoulder and said, keep your eyes closed. And then all of a sudden I had this smell that came. And she said, tell me what you're seeing. I said, I'm not seeing, I'm smelling. And she said, well, what are you smelling? And I said, death. She said, how do you know it's death? I said, I don't know, but I know it's the smell of death. So she then said, I want to hear and see everything you're seeing. So as this was unfolding in front of me, I saw a rectangular stone. I don't know what to call it. At the time, I called it like an altar. And up above, there were lights shining down on it. There were stone walls and there was arches, and I could hear murmuring in the background. And I felt like I was underground when I was in this place. And so then the scene shifted and Peggy said, what are you seeing now? I said, now I'm on a seashore or a lake shore, and I'm looking down at hard packed sand. And she said, now what are you seeing? I said, I see men's feet, and they're in these very, very worn sandals. And she said, look up a bit. I see the edge of a robe. And then she said, look all the way up. And when I looked up, I was looking at a man who was dressed as a monk in a very rough brown cassock. And the thing that drew me the most was his eyes. He had very, very compelling eyes. He had a basket of shells on his arm. I remember that. And Peggy just said to me, Dorry, you pay attention to this man. This man, this monk, is going to be very important in your future. And that was it. And that was when I was in my 20s. And then you fast forward. It's 2006. My husband had passed in 2004. I had been living in Florida for 16 years, I guess, since 1990. And grief didn't set in until 2 years after he passed. For 2 years, I was totally numb. The outside of me kept on functioning because I owned a business. I had employees, I had a mortgage, I had responsibilities. I had every problem that came down the pike after he died. In retrospect, I said that my troubles lined up like airplanes on the runway at Tampa International Airport. You know, as one took off, another one landed. Right. So it's lucky in a way that I was numb. So anyway, I had always wanted to go to Italy. And my grief had really almost morphed into a depression at that time. And I was having a constant argument with God because I felt that he deserted me. I called him a he, but it wasn't even a he. It was just whoever you are. I was that annoyed because I felt that I'd been left with nothing. And that I was in the depths of depression and pain, and I kept knocking at the door and no one was opening it. So the greater power and myself weren't on good terms by the time I got to Assisi. And my girlfriend who accompanied me on that trip said, let's ditch the guides. Let's just drop our stuff at the hotel and let's go to the Basilica by ourselves because Assisi is a very special place. She had been there before. So I said, all right. I was fed up of earphones and being in churches that I never got to feel. I had to be listening to the history of the church and all the rest of it. So I was game. So we went and we crossed the main church, went down to the lower church, which is quite dark. And the basilica was built on top of the lower church of St. Francis. So I just got down that stairs. I stumbled, sat down into a pew. Esme was sitting beside me. That was my girlfriend. And I started off again and said, you know, God, you have deserted me. You've done nothing for me. I keep asking for your help and nothing happens. I'm done. I'm fed up. I can't do this anymore. I'm at the end of my tether. There's nothing left for me. I have no future. All I could see was I was going to be the caregiver for my mother, and there would be nothing else. I would have no life. There was nothing. And then all of a sudden, this loud, booming voice came from, I have no idea where. And it said, in all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And I just sat bolt upright and opened my eyes and looked around. And I started sobbing because I realized the vision I had had with Peggy Eaton in my 20s was now coming alive right in front of me. It was a murmuring in the background. It was monks holding a service. In front of me was the rectangular, I guess it's a bier or sarcophagus of St. Francis. There was a light shining from up above onto the coffin. And there were stone walls all around and very dim light. And I just couldn't believe. I also at the same time knew that that very verse, which came from Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 3:16, was written in the flyleaf of a Bible that I had. It was given to me by my in-laws when I was 17. So it was like, it was just another epiphany. And I just didn't know what to do with myself. So Esme just put her arm around my shoulders and said, I got to get you out of here. So we go outside and I'm standing there and I'm, you know, when you get that, you're crying and you can't get your breath and you're going, and I'm trying to tell her what had happened, because at first I thought she must have heard what I heard, but of course she didn't. And then I said, I've got to tell you what happened. But before I could get it out, those shivers, that bliss, that it just tingles. It's as if your blood has developed a vibration of its own through all of your arteries and veins. It just goes. It's not a tingle. It's almost like a buzz or a hum. And that went through me for about 10 seconds. And then there was just this peace that just came over me. And then I just looked at Esme and I just told her what had happened. And the depression was gone. There was just this amazing, amazing peace that I felt. And I didn't know how to describe it. Even now, the feeling comes back. Every time I tell this story, the feeling comes back to me. So long story short, I get back home. We went back to Florida for the winter time. And I started, my mom and I spotted something in the newspaper about a spiritualist church. So we went the next Sunday, and we got a copy of the church bulletin as we went in. We took our seats in the pew, and I started looking at the church bulletin. And then I nudged my mother because I had told her what happened. And I pointed at the bottom of the church bulletin. And here at the bottom was Proverbs 3:16. In all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. So I knew I was in the right place at the right time. Although I have had so many and many, many gifts from spirit that I call them miracles, um, gifts of grace. Uh, Spirit has been so good to me in my life. So I feel as though we've had a very good relationship ever since. And as for having the God urge satisfied, Cece did that for me.
That's very special. Very few have an opportunity or an experience like that.
I'm aware of that now, and I kept on saying, well, why me? And I think we're meant to do the best that we can for ourselves, but when it comes time that we surrender, when we give up our fight in a way, when we surrender to whatever power we acknowledge as a divine power, then that's when that power lifts us up. I just felt like I had been lifted into another dimension, although I know it wasn't another dimension. But when I was lifted up, I have never felt that kind of depression again in my life, because I've always known from that point forward that I am never alone. It doesn't matter how many of my loved ones have passed. I am never alone.
That's beautiful. And I think in our deepest grief and depression and things like that, it has an opportunity to do a couple things. I mean, some people who don't have any faith or spirituality, they can die inside internally and live the rest of their life just as a shell of a human, or it has the opportunity to crack open that egg and get us on that spiritual journey.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to come face to face with that power of love. That once we're at rock bottom, we're so open to whatever comes in. And I think that's why so many people in the depths of grief or at any other chaotic aspect in their lives, when they reach out and when they are really, really at wit's end, that there's an opportunity. And, I don't think we even have to be open to it. It's almost as if that bolt of lightning just strikes us. And it's a life-changing event.
When did the afterlife and mediumship start coming into you? I mean, I know you'd witnessed it at a spiritualist church. Did you ever have any connections that way, or how did that open up? Because you are a medium to be reckoned with. You're out there making a difference now. So, but how did you get involved?
I had, as I said, I had been very aware of spiritualism. When after Assisi, I started meditating. And I started first with a recording of Dr. Brian Weiss. But the only thing was, I listened for 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden I went someplace else. And I couldn't understand why. I think I heard it the first time, but then I would sit every morning at the same time on the couch in the same place. And I would get these wonderful colors that would start to arrive. And I desperately wanted to know that there was more coming for me than what had happened at Assisi, because to my mind, I'd had these signals throughout my life, so that I felt that I was on the cusp of something new happening. So one evening, it wasn't evening, actually, it was 3:00 in the morning, which I've heard is for poets and mediums, that we wake up at that time. I think worry warts do too. But anyway, I woke up and I thought, oh, I can't get back to sleep. This is terrible. So I thought, well, if I meditate, maybe I will be able to sleep. And so I go into my quiet place, and then all of a sudden, I had a clairvoyant vision that came in. And the clairvoyant vision, I was looking at a young woman with long dark hair, and she was holding the hands of a lady, which I knew was me. And all I could see really was were her eyes. And she was staring at me, and it was as if her eyes were giving me a message to pay attention. And all of a sudden, across, and it was like a moving picture, there was this beautiful breastplate that was like hammered silver that had turquoise inlaid in it. And that passed. And then there was a headdress that came that had like peacock feathers going all the way down to the ground. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is this? And then another clairaudient episode, very loud. And I saw a word. And as I heard the word, each of the letters was spelled out. And the word was Hualteca. And it was Hualteca. And I didn't know if this was a real word, if it was another language. And then I got a second word, and the second word was Tolteca, given to me exactly the same way. So don't ask me how. I went back to sleep. Next morning, I still had this in my head. I wrote it down. I have that journal. I'm not a good journaler. I'm a good starter, but not a good finisher. So I wrote it down. I'll write for 3 months or so, and then I'll say, oh, I don't have time. So I was telling my mother about it, and she said, well, why don't you do that googly thing, on the computer, find out what it means. So I did. And I found out that Hualteca was in the, I don't know how, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, I know, the Nahuatl language, which is from the ancient Aztecs. And it's still spoken today by 1.5 million people, mostly in the in central Mexico area and Central America. And it means, now when I looked it up, it first came in a Nahuatl French dictionary. Luckily, I do speak some French. So it said, faire surgir quelque chose. So I had to go look up that because I didn't know what surgir meant. So I went and looked it up. And it means to cause to appear or to loom. Now, I had been asking for proof positive that this was real. And this was my proof positive, because I knew nothing about the Aztecs. I didn't know the language existed. I had never been to a place where the language was spoken. My ancestry goes back to the 1600s. It's all Scottish.
Right.
So it was really strange. And then I found that Tolteca, whom I took to be the young woman who was holding my hand, means a woman from Tolan, or a wise woman, or an artisan. So I thought, well, you asked for the proof. From that day forward, and well, actually it was from the day of Assisi, I have studied, I have developed, I've sat in circles, I've taken classes. And then in, I think it was 2009, all of a sudden I started getting music and lyrics, and I started writing. By 2010, I guess it was, I was demonstrating in the church I was attending. I was doing, they used to hold a fair once a month. I did that. I did private readings. I couldn't get enough. And then I was motivated to become a reverend. Not because I wanted to have a church, and not because I wanted to be a preacher, but I wanted to separate myself and show that I was dedicated to the evidential spiritual medium aspect of this. whatever anyone wants to call it, whether we call it the spiritual side of life, or I wanted that. I wanted it to be sacred somehow, because it was to me. And so I did become ordained in 2013. I didn't become ordained to do weddings and funerals and that sort of thing. That my motivation was strictly from within. And it's funny, you know, I'm wearing this because this is the St. Francis cross.
Mm-hmm.
I left Assisi so quickly. I never did get to enjoy Assisi or do what the tourists do in Assisi. And the minister who sponsored me for the ministry knew this story. And she obtained this St. Francis cross for me and gave it to me as a gift on my ordination. So I do cherish it. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. In 2013, I had the delight of having inspirational channeled messages come to me, which I did for 9 months, I guess it was. And I shared it with 5 friends at the same time, live as it was coming through. I would sit in meditation. I would hear what the topic was, and then I would go to my desk and I would write. And the writing came in, which I found out was something called scriptio continua. A friend of mine had to tell me what it was because I didn't understand it. It was in cursive, but it was all of one piece. There were no capitals. There were no breaks between sentences. It just was one run-on all the way through. And
Wow.
it was really, really unusual. And I looked it up and I found out it was how the ancient Greeks and Romans did in classical times. And that's how they wrote. So that lasted for quite a long time. So I have just kept following the path wherever Spirit has pointed. I've tried to listen, try to follow that guidance, because I took that message from that Bible verse as being, if I acknowledged that power within me and I listened and felt and followed that guidance, that's what I was meant to do.
Amazing that you're following the breadcrumbs, and if only we could all do that. Fast forward a little. How did we end up meeting? How did you end up meeting Carrie and Phil? And here we are today.
Well, yes, it is a fast forward. In 2013, I guess it was, I stopped being a snowbird with my mother because she really was ill and too difficult for us to make the trip. And so I was back full time in Canada, which was for me easier. It's very difficult to lead a life where you are half the year in one place and half the year in another, because you have your feet in two different countries. Friends have their lives continue on without you, so you feel kind of rootless. So when I came back here, I had started going to a church in 2011. I started going to a church in Burlington, and it was there that I started sitting in circle. It was there that I led a circle, 2 circles, I guess, one in that church. And in 2018, Phil did a workshop, and that's when I first met Phil. And I've had, I think it was, I counted, I had 15 tutors before Phil and Carrie. Mm-hmm. And but something resonated with me that hadn't resonated with any other kind of teacher. And I know the expression is that when the teacher arrives, when the pupil is ready, the teacher arrives. Right. And Phil was the one that did it for me. And then following the next course, Phil and Carrie came. And then I thought, oh my goodness, and she's Scottish too, so yes. that spoke to my heart a little bit.
That's right.
And then I went to the Netherlands and did a program with both of them over there. And it was just, I never, after that time, took any more tutoring from anybody else. And then COVID happened. And then everything was so compressed and so wonderful to have that connection with Phil and Carrie and the worldwide community that we have in workshops. I think I've only missed 2 episodes of The Gathering since it started.
Wow.
It is now my church.
Oh.
It's the only church I go to now, except if I'm serving at church.
Mm-hmm.
And so between workshops and The Gathering, I have a really healthy dose of spirit in my life each and every day. It's wonderful. I know a lot of people have suffered under COVID. And in some ways, yes, I've had difficulties too, but I have been so blessed with the community, with the family, with the ability to soak up so much knowledge.
I am going to ask you a question that I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask anyways. Well, first of all, we have our classes with Phil and Carrie. They do Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays online every week. And Tuesdays is the way to your spirit. Wednesdays is psychic class, and Thursdays is mediumship. So we've been doing it since May, I guess, 2020, which have been wonderful. But what is the difference in your life those classes have made? And if you could talk a little bit about what happens, because I'm not a practicing medium out in the world doing demonstrations or anything, nor do I feel trained and practiced enough to do that. But there's what I see is magic that occurs in the Thursday classroom. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
I think that the magic occurs because of the tutors that we have. They're so supportive. Other tutors I have had some what I would call supportive tutors, but Phil and Carrie can critique and teach in such a nurturing way that I have not seen. The other thing that there is such an absence of in a lot of workshops that I have been in before, there's this feeling of competition between the mediums who are taking these courses, and you feel it. That's totally absent. We are all, I use the word family or community. We are all very supportive of each other. We cheer on the development of other people because we see the leaps and bounds. And I think that's because in the past, when it was in person all the time, you would maybe take a workshop in the spring and you might take another workshop in the fall. And between the two, you should be doing sitting in the power, which is really emphasized by Phil and Carrie. But you don't really keep that continuity the way you do with the classes that we do on Zoom, because we're involved day in, day out with this, and the knowledge is just compressed and you grow so much faster. It's just, I know that so many people thought Zoom wasn't going to work for teaching mediumship, or it wouldn't work for doing communication with the spirit world. But nobody thinks about the fact that energy doesn't need a place. Energy can be anywhere. It's not confined. And so doing the Zoom classes and having the continuous education and the ability to have practice sessions, to do demonstrations, even though we can't do them in person, we're still exercising and honing our skills. It's absolutely, I pray that Zoom and all that we've learned about it never goes away when it comes to mediumship and psychism and teaching online, or church online. Unfortunately, I don't think it's helped a lot of churches who have buildings, etc. but oh, it has certainly spread the word of spirituality and mediumship and the afterlife like nothing has ever done before. The reach is phenomenal.
I would have never seen this coming. For many know that I lost my main business, my catering business, which paid the bills. And talking about the afterlife and doing We Don't Die radio, it was more than a hobby, it was a passion, but it didn't provide any income. So we had to think very quickly on our feet when COVID hit, and Carrie and Phil, great mediums, and then Scott Milligan, also a great medium. They couldn't travel, they couldn't work. And I'm sure it was the spirit world that put the thought in my mind, let's do something online. Let's figure out this Zoom thing and do it. And so not only doing the classes every week, but this Sunday gathering really grew out of doing something that not only help other people, but help us as well. Provide spirituality with mediumship demonstration included in each one. But you've seen me on the Sunday gatherings. I mean, I get to exercise my creativity. They're fun, they're interesting. And now we have this global community. And I really think that although there will be live events in the future, but this is the future because
Yes.
there are so many more people that can now tune in for free and get this shot of spirituality and get to know that they are perfect just the way they are and help through grief and all these great things. So it's only going to grow. And then once the world cleans up, we'll start traveling again. But we've already discussed no matter where we are, we're going to keep having our gatherings going. The question I had about the online courses is I've experienced magic in the breakout rooms. And so I wanted to ask you too, you had mentioned sitting in the power. There are people that are listening or viewing right now that don't have a clue what that is. If you could talk about that and just about what happens in the breakout rooms.
Okay, but first I just want to tell you, you are a pioneer because you started a movement. Nobody else was doing this online. And now church services are online, classes are online, everybody's Zooming. So that's something to think about.
Dorry. Thank you.
So sitting in the power is your way for two things actually. Sitting in the power for me is a little different from meditation because meditation is a mind relaxing kind of a thing. Whereas for me, sitting in the power is much more of a connection point for me with the spirit world. And there are different ways to access that particular, I call it the citadel inside myself, your inner sanctum. Everybody has it. It's not special. It's not just for mediums. Everybody, the human body is designed that way. And the same as we're all designed to have psychic abilities. So when I go into that quiet time and I spend that's when I can come face to face with the energy of love that I describe as the divine or my spirit team. I do use meditation too when I need to relax, clear my mind, and just reflect on things. I will do that as well. The best way to describe what happens in the breakout rooms, when you do a Thursday class in mediumship or a Wednesday class in psychic, you're face to face with another person who's in the class. And then you each do a reading for the other. And I found when I did the psychic readings, I remember coming back and saying to Carrie and Phil, the most amazing thing is you fall in love with that other person because you get to know their soul. You see inside them and you see that divine connection that we all have with them. And that really was so profound for me to feel that. And it wasn't just with one person. The next time I went in a breakout room, it was the same thing. I still felt the same way. I thought, now, you don't learn people's secrets that they don't want to divulge to you. but you see that pure essence, you see their soul qualities in a way that just lets you know about the oneness that connects all of us. And then when you go in the mediumship one, we each bring through loved ones for the other. And then the lovely thing is you get a little bit of acknowledgement, a yes or a no, or I don't know. And it just helps you to hone your skills and practice and practice. And it is supportive of each other. And I also go into a different group for demonstrating mediums. And so I have done all the classes. So you need to know that I have done all of the classes. I'm hooked on spirit, so that's all right. I've cut back a little bit now, but all I can tell you is the Tuesday class is something that I think is absolutely wonderful. You don't have to be a medium or a psychic. It's about developing yourself personally, learning to know yourself and accept yourself, your light, your dark, to heal the inner child, heal your wounds, reflect, know why you sometimes behave the way you do, but understanding yourself in a significant way. And I think every single person on earth could benefit from that class. So it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I know I probably sound like a broken record, but I have been doing this since the very beginning. And I have been to every single class. So I know that my mediumship development has grown in leaps and bounds, even though I demonstrated before feeling Carrie and I had done readings, etc. Everything has just been fine-tuned to such a degree, and it has accelerated my progress. And I will be a lifelong learner. I'm a believer in that, because other professionals do continuing education. And I think mediums should too, because there's always something to learn. There's a better way of doing things that are going to come. So however it happens, I'll be there. I'll be the student, perennial student. Luckily, the tuition is not universal, not university level, so I can manage it.
Well, it's addictive in a good way, because
yes,
when you leave something feeling so good, or even with myself, every so often I'll be in the medium class and I think I'm saying something from my imagination. I'm getting this weird feeling, and I just, the idea is just to share whatever we get, and to have that person on the other side saying in the breakout room, that's my husband. He did that. He said that.
Yeah.
This is this happened. And then my sweet little grandmother hasn't come through very much at all. She was always a very quiet person. And in the breakout room on one of those Thursdays, the most beautiful evidence came out about my little grandmother being by my side, and so much evidence. And I think she probably felt comfortable being with that one person instead of in front of a big group. They're just so sacred.
I love the ones that bring their energy so that you just feel full of their passion. And it just, you feel as though they climbed inside your body because they're so energetic. It's wonderful.
Talk about that a little bit. When you do a reading for somebody, the agreement is whatever comes in, you're going to share, right? So
yes.
How do they come into you? Is it clairvoyance with vision? Talk maybe a little bit about the feeling, or if you get any tastes or smells or anything like that.
It comes in every single one of those ways. And it's up to the spirit communicator of the individual in the spirit world, how they're comfortable communicating. One of the benefits of the classes is that you learn to develop each and every single one of those psychic faculties, so that whichever way, the whole idea is to perfect yourself as a medium, so that whichever way that spirit individual wants to communicate, wants to talk to you or show you, or let you smell a perfume or a tobacco, or that And for me, a lot of the time it comes as claircognizance, so that I just know. And then when I just know, I don't know how I know. It just, everything seems to come together. Sometimes when I get a clairvoyant vision right at the very beginning, it's not even a nanosecond. But I know once I make the connection with the individual, all the information that came in that nanosecond just unfolds and it rolls off your tongue. And I understand what you say about feeling that it's your imagination. And when I first had claircognizance, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was my imagination. And then I just said, oh, just talk, just talk. And when you start hearing, yes, correct, yes, yes, you think, it's not my imagination. Don't doubt it.
I think that's really important to underline, because even people that aren't practicing mediums, never took a class, you get these little whiffs of cologne or the pipe,
Yes.
or that feeling, or out of the corner of your eye, you think somebody's sitting there, that's your loved one. And then we just brush it off as our imagination. But that's communication.
It is. And, or you just feel, or a thought comes into your mind all of a sudden out of the blue. So you're not thinking in a linear fashion. All of a sudden you say, oh, why am I thinking about my mother all of a sudden? You know, it's because your mother's there. She's present. She's making herself known to you. There's so many ways that they reach out that if we're not aware, we don't recognize. But it's the most magical thing that they live in the same world, a different dimension, but in the same space we occupy. So they're always present. We just aren't always aware.
I know your husband is in the spirit world.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask about him coming through and how you still communicate with him. How's your relationship now? Because they're very much alive.
Yes. Well, I have to tell you that it took 8 years for my husband to decide to make himself known to me.
Wow.
And I was doing mediumship, and I was in a milieu where there were lots of mediums who could have brought him through. But I also have come to understand that after he passed, and I had to learn to develop my own strengths, my independence, how I needed to function in the world without a partner. I had a business I had to sell. I'd had a business for over 13 years. My mother was now a widow. My father died 16 months after my husband died. And so I became a caregiver. But after that 8 years, when he finally did make himself known, then the floodgates opened. And he comes through quite regularly. I have a way of knowing when it's him. My two strongest communicators are my husband and my mother. And I can feel the energy is different, and also how I feel in certain places on my face. So, and I was annoyed just recently because for about 3 weeks, I hadn't been aware of my husband. And then I did a 2-day course with Phil and Carrie. And every single time I was in a breakout room, or guess who came through? So it was as if to say, you know, I'm always here. It's just, you know, I guess he must be busy sometimes. I may be his wife, but he also has children in the spirit, you know, in on earth. So, but it's a wonderful path that you follow together. It's a different path. It's not the same. You do miss the physical. There's no doubt. I would love to have his arms wrapped around me in a great big bear hug. But to know that he's walking with me and supporting me and loving me in the same way is one of the greatest gifts of mediumship that I will ever have.
How about your little sister?
She just recently came through. Now, she was nonverbal when she passed. Mm. She had a chronic condition. And so when she comes, she always comes as an appearance, but then my mother will step in behind so that my mother will do the communication, or my father will do the communication. It's usually my mother, because my father was his nickname was Silence when he was growing up. So he was a very quiet man. And my mother is the one that is very dynamic and full of energy. So that's how she would come forward. But see, I only have two memories of my sister, and that was the day she died, because we were playing together when she passed, and then the spirit one, and the time in her coffin. So we don't have shared memories in my bank of memories. I was too young, but I'm sure she has a much greater perspective, and I'm sure she has grown up, and I know she's healthy and doing well in the spirit world, because we lose all our afflictions when we go there.
That's so wonderful. And
Yeah.
when they pass, there's no memory of any pain,
Now,
healthy, well. What difference does it make in your life now being a medium, and the difference that it makes on your recipients?
my husband has been gone now for 17 years. I don't feel alone. I'm never lonely.
Mm.
Mediumship gives me a whole family in the spirit world that I'm aware of. It also changes me in that now, ever since I was little, I've never had a fear of death. I have a different philosophy of life, I guess it is. Mediumship to me is not a career. I've had about 6 different careers.
Mhm.
I've had different paths. But for me, mediumship is a calling. It's a vocation. I think I was called in Assisi to do what I do now. I think I felt that tap on my shoulder a long time ago, but didn't know what it meant. And it was only made clear to me in Assisi. And I know that I don't know what I would do if the spirit world stopped communicating with me all of a sudden. I don't think that'll ever happen, but I'm a medium because I can't not be a medium.
That's beautiful. And I know you've made a difference for a ton of people who have walked that path of grief and depression and hard to even get up in the morning. And then through your kindness and your calling, you shared just some of those details about their loved one that you couldn't possibly know, to lift their hearts that their loved one is still alive. Because we are real people when we transition. We are very real. We're not just these balls of light or anything like that.
No, they aren't. And they bring their sense of humor, they bring their quirks because they want to be recognized. We know that they progress on the other side, but they come to us so that we can identify them. They bring forward, and they'll bring forward their not so nice qualities too, because they're a whole person.
That's right. Oh, Dorry, wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked you?
I'm trying to think. I think one of the things that I love the best about the mediumship and is the different gifts that I've been given. Not just the mental mediumship, but the gifts of the inspirational writing that a group of spirits called Phaedra brought to me. I've had spirit art. All of a sudden, in 2019, Spirit gave me the gift of fine art and portraiture that I had not done before. And it just seems that Spirit just keeps on giving. And I cannot tell you, to me, I keep on saying it's gift of grace or it's a gift of miracle, whatever it is. But I think that once you open yourself to Spirit, magic happens. And you just have to be aware, to accept with gratitude, especially since in Canada, this is gratitude weekend. This is Thanksgiving weekend here. So it's a wonderful time to be able to share how very grateful I am for It's going to sound strange to say all the life challenges that I have had, because those very life challenges, the suffering, the agonies we all go through, each of those experiences changes you if you're aware that in the seed of every bad thing that happens to you, there's a kernel of knowledge that you have to discover. And if you take time to reflect, go over it and look and say, what did I learn from it? Is there a lesson in it for me? There always is. And it's usually something that propels you forward. We all have crises in our lives. It's not what happens to you. It's what would you do with what happens to you that makes the difference in your path and in your spiritual development.
Beautiful. And how can people reach you, and what services do you offer?
I do private readings, evidential mediumship readings. I also do, now those are about the communicator. I also do psychic readings, which would be about yourself. I do spiritual assessments. I have done demonstrations, workshops. The best way to reach me is my website at dorryrice.com. And that gives you a little bit of information. You can book directly on there if you need a reading. I'll give you a little bit of an information, but you've heard a lot about me here. But that's the best way. And if there's also a page on my website that if you have a question or a comment, if you want, you can always reach out and send it to me on that. So I'm always able to help. I hope. I'm willing to help. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And we have a code of ethics, right?
We do. We do not predict. We don't do health. We don't give advice. And we are always professional and confidential.
Beautiful. Well, Dorry, it's been a very fast hour. I wish we were sitting side by side on a couch having a cup of tea, but this is the next best thing until that happens. Thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts for your commitment to humanity, both here living, because you know firsthand the pain of grief, and to those who get an opportunity to have their voice heard again. And those are our friends in the spirit world. What a gift.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I really have appreciated this. As I say, we've never had a conversation before. It's been a hello, goodbye kind of a thing. So it's kind of nice to have a chat. I know we're like friends online, but as I say, it's always just very, very briefly. We know each other, but we don't know each other.
Well, we are a member of a big family, and that is what we've created online. And it's really interesting because when you can be real with someone and you're involved with talking about the afterlife and grief and love, and you tap into those special gifts that we all have.
Yes.
I mean, it's just beautiful. You, like you say, you can fall in love with somebody who's on the screen right there in your room. I mean, they're just really regular, wonderful people who have these bright lights shining. And for our listener or our viewer, sometimes it's very hard to believe that there's a bigger picture going on here. But I don't think as humans we're meant to know 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week, this bigger picture, because there's learning to be had, there's emotions to feel, there's a journey to be on. But as a little gift, there are those times. And I think everybody has felt them, Dorry, whether you know the phone's going to ring and then it does, you know who's on the other line, or you say something at the same time someone else says it, or you just get that gut instinct or that knowing. You know, we get these little flashes of our divinity. So my request to everyone is just take a deep breath, realize we're on this planet hurling around a never-ending universe down to our tiniest molecule and atom within. We are empty space. Our human brains that we have now are not meant to know it all, but you don't have to believe the negative thoughts that might come from your mind. We all have them. but you can say, not right now. Thanks for sharing. And take Dorry up on being in those precious moments. Asking, Dorry, let me just ask, for someone who wants to start their spiritual journey and be in touch with the divine, is it as easy as just asking and allowing?
Yes. And spending time in the quiet, because when you spend time in the quiet, you send out your plea that you want this, and then you wait. You wait for the answer. It may not come in the moment, but it will come.
Wow. It may not
And
come
in
in
your
the way.
most desperate times.
Yeah. Wow. And it could come through the voice of someone else in the weirdest ways.
Anyway.
I want to just say two miraculous things that have recently happened is one gentleman had a child who passed, unfortunately, and never even knew anything about podcasts or anything, and just wanted to listen to some news. So on his cell phone, he just asked Siri to play some news. And what popped up is an episode of this We Don't Die radio.
Wow.
And got him in. And then just a couple of days ago, I got a message from a lady whose son has passed, unfortunately. And when she walked into her house, not only was the television on, but on the smart television, YouTube was on. And it was the beginning of our Sunday gathering.
Oh, wow.
I know.
No coincidences.
Right. So there is a magnificent force, but the more you ask, and like Dorry keeps stepping up for more, I think that's probably why you're given more, because you are pure of service, you have love in your heart. And I think that's why I've always liked you so much. I just think I know who you are. I just, I
That's
know
good.
you.
Thank you. I like that.
And for our listener or for our viewer also, we know who you are. If you're here, even if you're at the very beginning of your spiritual journey, just hang on. There's lots of episodes to listen to, lots of free things. You might want to come on one of our classes and start learning and exercising the power of your own soul. But the journey, it's about the journey, not the destination. Yes. The same thing holds true with our spiritual journey. I wish I could give you a little thumb drive with everything I've learned the past 25 years about the afterlife and all these magical, miraculous experiences I've had. And then you just plug it in and you download it and voila, you have it. But I cannot. But I don't think it would work anyways. I think it takes you being on your personal journey and finding your own truths. So all I ask is that you hang in there. We have lots of resources at wedon'tdie.com. Mm-hmm. Please come to a Sunday gathering, free, absolutely. There's a ton of replays there, so you can be inspired for a long time. And you have at least one episode for every day of the year of this show. We have lots, and I'm only an email away, sandrachamplain@gmail.com. That's me. So one last time, I want to thank Dorry Rice for being here. You can find out more about her at dorryrice.com. And for our listener or our viewer, really think about what we've talked about today and be open that just around you, just a breath away, are our loved ones. Now, they're not always here, they're only a thought away, so they can be. But our lives continue on. They are healthy, they are well, they're safe, they're vibrant. And while we're here, our life is for a purpose. And so go on your own journey. You won't regret it. You've got family here and friends. And even though we haven't met in person, and we certainly may, but we are very real people and we love you and we appreciate you. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain and I've been your host on We Don't Die Radio. I do believe that life is an education for our soul and that our life here on earth is important. So ask, be open, quiet the mind, go on that internal journey. You won't regret it. So thank you for listening or for viewing, and we'll see you soon.